Hear now the word of the Lord, as is written in the book of Isaiah, chapter 62. For Zion's sake I will not hold my peace, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a lamp that burns. The Gentiles shall see your righteousness, and all kings your glory. You shall be called by a new name, which the mouth of the Lord will name. And you shall also be a crown of glory in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no longer be termed forsaken, nor shall your land any more be termed desolate, but you shall be called Hephzibah, and your land Beulah. For the Lord delights in you, and the land shall be married. For as a young man marries a virgin, so your sons shall marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. Amen. Second lesson comes from the Gospel of Matthew. This is from the 22nd chapter. And Jesus answered and spoke to them again by a parable and said, The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding. And they were not willing to come. And he sent other servants, saying, Tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious. He sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite them to the wedding. So the servants went out into the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Amen. Our final lesson comes from the work Apocalypse Revealed. This is a portion of number 812. It's an explanation of the verse, Let us rejoice and exult and give glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come. This signifies joy of soul and heart, and thence the glorification of the Lord, and henceforth there may be a full marriage of him with the church. It may also be evident, almost without explanation, that when the Lord's human is acknowledged to be divine, there is effected a full marriage of the Lord and the church. For it is known in the Reformed Christian world that the church is a church from the marriage of the Lord with her. For the Lord is called the Lord of the vineyard, and the church is the vineyard. And the Lord is called the bridegroom and husband, and the church is called the bride and wife. That there is a full marriage of the Lord and the church when his human is acknowledged to be divine is well known. For then God the Father and he are acknowledged to be one, and the soul and the body. When this is acknowledged, the Father is not approached for the sake of the Son, but then the Lord himself is approached, and God the Father through him, because the Father is in him as the soul in the body, as was said. Before the Lord's human is acknowledged to be divine, there is indeed a marriage of the Lord with the church, but only with those who approach the Lord and think of his divine, and not at all whether his human is divine or not. The simple in faith and in heart do this, but rarely the learned and erudite. Moreover, also there cannot be given 3 husbands to one wife, nor 3 souls to one body. And therefore, unless one God is acknowledged, in whom is the Trinity, and that God is the Lord, there is no marriage. Amen. Our text for this morning comes from Matthew 22, which we just read. The kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, and they were not willing to come. This is a look at the New Testament parable that gives us some important truths about how to get ourselves ready for heaven. It's not unusual for people to be invited to weddings these days, and our normal customs are that the wedding is usually followed by some kind of social celebration, including a nice meal, and for the guests, the whole thing is over and done with, usually in just a few hours. But things were quite different in ancient times. Without all the holidays and vacations and laws about working hours that we enjoy, the wedding feast was pretty much the most fun that people could have. Since most people had to travel on foot, if the wedding was in a village more than a few miles away, they would need to also stay overnight. And these two considerations resulted in the tradition that existed in the Lord's time that a wedding feast featured eating and drinking to excess, and a good one could last as long as a week. It was a memorable event. And it was against this backdrop of this tradition that the Lord told the parable of the wedding feast. But before we review it, it's useful to have a few key symbols in mind as we think about the parable. First of all, clearly the king is Jehovah, and the king's son is going to be the Messiah, because remember, it's being addressed to the people of the Jewish church, and it's the king who's inviting, it's God who's inviting the people of his church, which at that time was the Jewish church, to come to a wedding. He's come on earth, he's giving himself. His job was to try and restore that church. Here I am. Let's have a conjunction. Let's get together. Let's have that wedding of God and the church. So he invites the people of that church to him. And talks about preparing fatted oxen, fatted cattle, and that generally represents the purification and regeneration. So the idea is there would be a church, and you'd come together, you'd learn truths, people would be reborn. It'd be a great thing. And in the parable, which the Lord told, what did they say? No, I'd rather go work on my farm. I have business to attend to. I just don't want to come. So all these people were invited to this wedding feast, which is a really good thing, and they didn't want to go. They were more interested in a list of things that were of self, my own interest, and the world, my farm, my business. And there's the lesson. The Lord's saying, come to heaven. Let's get regenerated. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a wedding feast. Marriage of the church with the bride and the bridegroom. It's going to be terrific. And they're saying, yeah, no, I like things the way they are. They mocked and killed the king's servants when they were sent out to call them and remind them. These represent the various prophets that were sent out. If we look at the way the word is constructed, there's book after book of prophets who were doing exactly that, going to the Jewish church at the time, that was the church, saying, get ready, there's going to be this thing, and how many of them were mistreated in many different ways. So the killing of servants, in this case, because these are people who are messengers carrying the word of the Lord, they represent the word. So the killing of the servants is therefore destruction of truths in the word, a prophecy of the crucifixion. And because of their response, it says he sends out armies to destroy them. And this is again is a judgment. What happens spiritually to them. The invitation comes. What happens to any people, whether it's this historic group or whether it's people today, the Lord sends out his invitation, and if they choose the loves of self in the world, then instead of being brought up, then you find out that you are in a state of destruction. And when the invited guests refuse to come, only then does he send out an invitation to Gentiles. It's quite a message. Remember who the context of who was being told this thing. In the mind of the people at that time, Jews were of a higher class than Gentiles. In this case, of course, the word Gentile just means people in the other group. So if we're in the church, anybody who's not in the new church, for us, is a Gentile. But for them, the idea that the Lord would want to talk to them, that's why the story of the Samaritan woman is so important, because she was one of the lower ones. Here was this, their Messiah was talking to people that didn't belong to their group. It was shocking. So he invites Gentiles to come to the new church. The wedding hall is filled with guests, which is a prophecy of the rapid and enthusiastic growth of the early Christian church. And it would be a lovely story if it ended there. He comes down, he invites these people, they don't want it, so he invites other people, they come, everything's great. But then you discover that there's a man in there without a wedding garment. Now, again, this requires a little context to understand what's going on here. The common people, remember, they went out into the streets and said, "We're having a wedding, come." And they were invited, but only this one guy was thrown out for not having a wedding garment. Now, what about him stood out in this crowd? What was the obvious difference? What is it that we miss in the telling of the story that people in that day would have heard and understood completely why it was a problem? Well, none of the people who were, he went out into the streets. People were walking by. Come on, come to the wedding. So nobody had a wedding garment in the sense that we think of them, like a tuxedo or a special gown. But in that church and in that time, they did have a tradition from the Mosaic law of ritual washing before an important event. Joshua 3. And Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." To sanctify simply means for them to wash themselves and their clothes. It's certainly symbolic of spiritual washing, of course, but the point is here that there was a long-standing tradition that even if you only had one garment to your name, which probably was the case for most of those people. I mean, think, the story of Samson. What was the treasure that they brought? 10 garments. How many of us have 10 garments just in our drawers? Very different perspective on clothing in those days. Even if you had only one garment, you took it off and you washed it before presenting yourself to the Lord, or in this case, going to a very special event like a wedding. So, okay, these people were invited for the byways, but they went home and cleaned up first. The thing that marked this particular man is that he had not prepared himself before coming to the wedding. He hadn't done his work. Walking down the road, the king's messenger invites him to the wedding, and instead of going home or to an inn or even to a well to wash and prepare himself, he just shows up at the feast, covered with the dirt that he acquired from his journey. Even today, with our more casual ways, we don't spend Saturday working in the garden or mowing the lawn and then go straight to a wedding without first cleaning up. We can all imagine the kind of reception that we would get if we did show up in our gardening clothes. So that's what stood out. Here are all these people who've done the best they can to clean themselves up and have responded appropriately, and this guy walks in and he's bad manners, rude. He stands out because he has not prepared himself. The rude guest was immediately cast out of the wedding. He represents that state of spiritual hypocrisy and deceit which cannot endure the sphere of heaven. Reading from the Arcana Celestia, number 2132. There are some people who during their bodily life have been imbued with the deceit of being able to feign themselves angels of light, And in the other life, when in this hypocritical state, they are also able to insinuate themselves into the nearest heavenly societies. But they do not remain there long, for the moment they perceive the sphere of mutual love there, they're seized with fear and horror and cast themselves down, and it then appears in the world of spirits as if they had been cast down, some toward the lake, some toward Gehenna, and some into some other hell. So the truth of the matter is, he was invited, but his hypocrisy and selfishness, he showed up, but he wasn't really taking part. He was not there interested. He stood out that way. And it's like the angels who are, if someone wants to go in the spiritual world, if you want to visit a society, you're welcome to do so. It's just the thing is, you discover is that if you really are not the kind of person who belongs there, it's not that they throw you out, it's you can't stand it. You get there and you can't stand the sphere of kindness and charity, and you don't like the music, so you leave. And that's what's happening here. The people who do not prepare themselves for the life of heaven, even though they're invited, leave. God's invitation to heaven is universal. We saw it in the way the parable works. Not only did it invite the people of the high church, but he also went out and invited everybody in the road, all the Gentiles. Everyone is to come to the wedding feast. This is an important idea. The Lord continuously invites everyone to come to him, for he says, "The kingdom of heaven is like to a king, who made a marriage for his son and sent his servants to call all them that were bidden." And finally he said, "Go into the pairings of the way, and as many as you shall find, bring to the marriage." Who doesn't know that this invitation or call is universal? And also that the grace of reception, I'm reading from TCR, a person obtains life by going to the Lord because the Lord is life itself, not only the life of faith, but also the life of charity. It's TCR 358. So, the man without a wedding garment. Now, this may weigh heavily on us because we don't want to be like that person. We want to be able to go to a heavenly society and stay there. And remember that by garments, everywhere in the Word, when we're talking about the garments, the things that cover a person, these are the truths that cover the good within. Good is what drives. Truth is what happens when you have good. It's the form of good. And in the opposite sense, falsities are what clothe evil. For a man is either in his own good or his own evil, and the truths or falsities proceeding from him are his garments. All angels and spirits appear clothed according to the truths of their good or according to the falsities of their evil. The things that show to others, the things of our heart are private, but what we do and how we act and what we say are our garments. There are truths. This is Apocalypse Revealed 166. The wedding garment is the divine truth from the Word. You can't just come as you are. This is the important thing about heaven. You can't just come as you are. You need to wash yourself. In the Old Testament, that teaching, in brief, is summarized by all those things that say, "Thou shalt not." And you get a list of things that you should stop doing. In the New Testament, there are all these parables where the Lord teaches and says, well, you need to think about what these things mean. And here are some illustrations. Here's some stories about people that show you how to wrestle with these ideas and come up with the right one. You see the morality that exists behind the rules. And so instead of acting from obedience, you begin to act from a moral nature. And finally, when we approach the Lord through the heavenly doctrines, we begin to see the awareness of actually those incredible spiritual truths that are behind the morality, of why it's important to live this way. It's not just because it's nicer. It's because it actually creates a receptacle of spiritual life within you. that makes it possible for you to be with the angels of heaven. So we have to fix our wedding garment. We have to look at our coverings and wash them, maybe patch some of the holes, and we have to prepare them. We have to learn truths, new truths. We have a lot of assumptions and a lot of things that we think might not even be true. So we have to constantly be weighing those things, again with the wrestling. The rational mind takes different ideas and weighs them against each other, and we have to make choices. All the time we're making choices. Those choices make changes in our mind and our brain. And then the spiritual life can flow in differently because influx is according to the vessel that we're creating by our choices and our actions. So we make judgments, and we find that maybe some things that we thought were true may not be true after all. So we get rid of them. We wash. And we can also admit to ourselves that sometimes we've been fooling ourselves because we like those ideas, but they're really not so good. So we have to take steps to correct the problem. This is how we prepare to be a wedding guest, is by looking at our garments. The truths that we have, do they represent what's going on? Have we taken steps to prepare ourselves for life in heaven? Now, these things sometimes are difficult to do. Again, the wrestling. And while we live in this world, we need to hold to the vision of the angels who are clothed in light, for it is the Lord's will and very purpose of the creation of the universe that we will someday be one of them and live with them to eternity. That's the purpose. That's what all this is about, is to get ourselves ready, to wrestle, to make choices, to receive the blessing of the angel of the Lord, and to not quit when we face these challenges. Amen.